Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Alzheimer's Association ALZ Talk on caring for the caregiver. I'm really excited to introduce you to our two guests today. Corey Gonzalez is the wife of her husband, Tony, who was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment a year ago at the age of 47. And we are also joined by Jim Manji, who is the caregiver for his wife, Kathleen, of 40 years. And Kathleen is in the late stage of the disease, living in a long-term care community. Welcome, Corey and Jim, to the ALZ Talk. I want to go ahead and get started. And, you know, when we think about caregivers, we recognize that there's a lot of responsibility that falls on their shoulders. And sometimes they're so immersed in caregiving that they don't really recognize the signs of caregiver stress. So Corey, I'm going to start with you. If you can just share with us, what were some of the things that you started to notice that were signs to you that you were experiencing caregiver stress?
I would say the first thing was that I got a little snippy and also sadness, some anxiety, feeling a little overwhelmed, fear were some of the first emotions that I really acknowledged that something needed to change.
And Jim, I know you talk about the midnight ambulance ride to the emergency room with Kathleen. That was kind of the moment where you recognized caregiver stress. Can you share that story with us?
For several years at the beginning of the journey, I was taking care of Kathleen all by myself. And I thought I was doing pretty well until that midnight ambulance ride with Kathleen. Now, she didn't understand what was going on. Me, I was thinking as we rode in the ambulance that maybe I needed to rethink this solo caregiving gig for both of our sakes, because I was the one on the gurney. I had collapsed late one night after a long day of taking care of my sweetheart. And when we managed to get the ambulance there, the guys said we needed to go to the hospital and we couldn't leave Kathleen alone. So we got to the hospital. It turned out to be, well, sort of a false alarm, but it was a true signal that I needed to do something about stress reduction. And I finally, at that point, opened myself to bringing in some help.
Yeah. And so, you know, what's interesting with caregiver stress is we have to know what those signs are, right, in order to be able to recognize them so that we can do something about them. And so when thinking about self-care, what resources did each of you leverage in order to manage your caregiver stress? Corey, I'm going to start with you first.
The first thing that I did was kind of take hold of my own medical issues and really sought care for myself. Meaning, you know, annual checkups I really caught up on, because with COVID craziness, I kind of let that slide. I was overweight and I took a hold of that. And I also got some counseling, some much needed counseling to help my emotional care.
Yeah. And Jim, what were some of the things that you did in order to be able to take care of yourself? What did you leverage as far as resources go?
Well, over the course of the years, I did some of the classic things that caregivers can and should do, like bring in outside help. But the one unusual thing that I did early on, when I was still doing it all by myself and not ready to bring in any help, I kind of came up with an in-place respite approach. Whenever there was half an hour when Kathleen was sleeping late or napping or just sitting on the porch, I did something to put dealing with activities of daily living and dealing with delusions and all that, put it out of my mind and just change the subject for myself. I sat down and did some research on a topic that I was interested in, not dementia. And then I wrote it up, the results of my research, and it turned into a manuscript. Now, writing is not for everyone, but the idea is that for almost everyone, you can find something that you can do in place and still be a caregiver, but get yourself some respite, whether it's learning a new subject, playing a video game, or as in my case, getting a couple of books published. But that was a side benefit of giving myself some respite.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that we hear a lot of caregivers talk about is how do I keep the individual living with dementia engaged and active? And Jim, I think you have a really great example of that with the Jim and Kathleen. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah. Kathleen was always a very active person. She used to play tennis, but when that no longer became feasible, she wanted to go to the gym very often. I am not a gym goer. I would prefer to do some other things, but okay. I started going to the gym with her and actually getting there on the treadmill, for example, helping her start it up and, you know, turn it on and get her workout. But working out next to her was actually a beautiful connection through doing that shared activity. So it really is important to look for things that the person can do. Don't pay attention to what they can't do. Help them with what they can do and join in if at all possible. It is a rewarding thing.
Yeah. And Corey, I know because Tony is in the very early, so he's got mild cognitive impairment.
Right.
There's things that you've talked about to consider, right? When you're thinking about what can the person do, what are their strengths, what are the things that they may need assistance with?
Right. I think that it's very important to know the stage that your person is at and really see and understand the things that they like to do, the things that they feel comfortable doing, and the environments that they are able to still feel comfortable in. I know that Tony really enjoys being social. And so I really make sure that we get out there and we do different things that that he really enjoys and that he can be a part of, seeing family, seeing friends. And I think that that's really important. I know that my grandmother, she suffered from Alzheimer's, and the later stage, although she didn't recognize who we are, you could still see the joy in her face by us just coming in and having a visit and helping her drink some water, or, you know, she would like a baby doll and she would like to hold the baby doll and we play music for her. So it really varies based on this stage, I feel.
Yeah, I think the important message is identify what are the likes, dislikes, right? The things that the individual loves to do and be able to modify those things. So, you know, I play the piano, but if I can no longer do that, I may still love to listen to music of someone playing the piano. So really modifying those things. And I think also making every activity a form of engagement, whether it's brushing teeth or helping to set the table or folding laundry, just really thinking about, again, how can you focus on the strengths of that individual and have them be part of the activity that, that you're doing. Great suggestions. Jim, I just want to touch real quickly on All's Connected, because I know that that was a resource that you talked about and how you really felt that this community surrounded you to support you, especially making the difficult decision to have to move Kathleen into a long-term care community.
Yes, indeed. I am not the kind of person that was particularly willing to go to one of these in-person support groups. I had the concept that was, you know, kind of touchy-feely stuff, and a lot of guys like me don't like that. But I found this resource offered by the Alzheimer's Association. It's called ALZ Connected, and the website is alzconnected.org. It is basically a 24/7 nationwide support group. It is subdivided into sub-forums for spouses, for adult children. There's an LGBTQ sub-forum, but it is a powerful tool through which lots and lots of people pose questions or just post gripes and get a lot of answers and a lot of support. And in particular, as you mentioned, Monica, when I was really struggling some years ago with the difficult decision about whether to bring Kathleen, my wife, to the memory center, many people whom I'd never met were incredibly supportive and provided great deal of advice and tips on how to make it happen. it gave me the confidence to do it. And I felt so good the night I had moved Kathleen. By the time I checked back into ALZ Connected, there were half a dozen posts asking me, how did it go? How are you? It's a great resource.
Yeah, I think it helps caregivers recognize that they're not alone, right? There's other people out there, care partners, caregivers who are going through similar situations, and they're out there to help support, share their tips and strategies, and their challenges that they're experiencing as well. So as a care partner, Corey, can you talk a little bit about how friends and family, what have they done to be able to support you as you're in this care partner role?
One of the most wonderful things, we have a very wonderful connection with some close friends, and I enjoy just kind of getting away from the disease. I enjoy just having a little bit of a break of just regular life and hearing about somebody else's time and somebody else's life experience. I have friends who call and ask if I'd like to go for a coffee, and if I'd like to go get a pedicure or go for lunch, or even just a simple phone call of, hey, how you doing? Or a quick text. I think that just having that connection has been so powerful for myself, and just still relating and being able to have that time to disconnect from what's going on day in and day out from the disease, and just kind of having that moment to relax and to just be you is really important.
I think I love what you say, because it's almost, sometimes caregivers have to feel like they have to have permission, right, to step away from the disease and not have every conversation be about it. And what I love about your examples, a lot of times we have friends and family who don't live near you. Right. They live in another state, in another city, and they're not readily available to come in and help, take Tony someplace for you or pick up something from the grocery store. And so I think the examples that you gave of just sending a note or making a phone call are things that any friend or any family can do to support a caregiver.
Our daughter lives in Montana, and she's not able to be here, on a daily basis. She comes in for special times, and she calls every day. Sometimes she'll send her dad a Snapchat or a quick text message and send a funny joke, just having that connection, not asking, what did the neurologist say, or how did your last CAT scan go? It's just, how's it going? Did you see that updated information about that football game or whatever? It's just that connection, I think is really important.
Yeah. And Jim, I know you shared, you didn't really leverage friends and family in the beginning, and looking back, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. The way Kathleen and I were living at the time, at the beginning of this journey 15 years ago, we didn't really have much of a local circle of friends and family. Well, our daughter was 3,000 miles away, but our daughter's phone calls to Kathleen were good, but our daughter's phone calls to me were equally valuable. She understood what the situation was. She was very supportive and sympathetic to me, but also because I raised a strong daughter, she was also very tough with me. And at one point, when she sensed that her dad was getting stressed out, especially after I told her about the ambulance ride, she said, Dad, you're no darn good to Mom from 6 feet under, except she wasn't quite so polite in what she said. But that support, maybe a little unwelcome as it may have been, was extremely valuable.
Yeah. And you've had some friends who've come in and helped you out, transportation for you.
Yes, things have changed in that I have become open to asking for help and welcoming help. And yes, it has turned out to be excellent in that I have never asked for help and been rejected. It does happen sometimes. I don't really want to help. That's okay. I now know that there are plenty of people out there in my circle, and I dare say in just about everybody's circle of acquaintances, there are people who will help. even if they might be a little bit hesitant at first.
So let's talk about that because, right, one of the hardest things I think for anyone, whether you're a caregiver or not, is to ask for help. And so, Corey, what tips would you give to care partners, caregivers who are kind of struggling with how do I ask people to help me?
I really feel that if you have something that you know that they enjoy, or something that you know that your person that you're caring for might enjoy time with them, I think that joining that force, so to speak, I think is important. I think that just being open and letting people know the truth of what's going on. I know that in different cultures and in different social connections, sometimes we try and protect our people, right? And we don't want necessarily people to see that our people at their weakest, at what we deem weak. And we need to not worry about that. We need to realize that we have to take care of ourselves, and sometimes we need an army to do that. And the only way that that happens is by communicating effectively.
Yeah, those are great tips. Jim, what would you, are some of the tips that you would share with other caregivers who are kind of hesitant in asking for help? How would they go about doing that?
Recognize that everyone, every caregiver needs help somewhere along the journey, and that there is absolutely no shame. There is no shame in the disease, and there is no shame in asking for help. And as I said a moment ago, if you don't get an overwhelming response the first time, don't worry, just keep asking. But more likely, you will find more people offering help once you're a little bit open to it. And all you need to do is take them up on their offer with something specific. If someone says, hey, let me know if you ever need help with something, go ahead and respond and say, yes, now that you mentioned it, could you drive Kathleen, or could you drive me, or could you pick up something at the Kroger or whatever? But give them something specific to do, and most likely they will. Look, this whole idea of asking for help, it will be good for you, the caregiver. It will be good for the person you're caring for, because a healthy caregiver provides better care for the person with dementia. It will also be good for the helper, because I can tell you, now that I'm in a position that I can help some other caregivers with some advice, especially earlier on in the journey, I feel really good about being able to help other people. And even just the process of coming out, if you will, asking for help, dealing with dementia, that is good for the community, because it shows the community that we're bringing dementia out of the darkness, and we're helping to dispel the stigma around it.
Yeah. And thinking about stigma, right? Because that can prevent caregivers from reaching out and asking for help. I know both of you had mentioned, offering information about Alzheimer's disease, about the person and how they're experiencing the disease, to help educate the people who are offering to help you, right? So that they understand what's going on. Can you talk a little bit about that? We'll start with you, Corey.
One of the things that I did was we had kind of a family meeting, and we invited people that are part of our care team, is essentially what I compiled. And our daughter, she zoomed in from Montana, and we had a few other friends from other parts of the country that zoomed in during that time frame. And we had a friend who is very knowledgeable about dementia overall, and she came in. Tony did not attend, and it gave an opportunity for our friends and our family to have those frank questions and those frank concerns addressed. And also we had an opportunity to kind of have a plan of how we can effectively communicate in the future, concerns that they might have about how they can help and how they can change how they communicate sometimes, because oftentimes with dementia, confusion happens, and sometimes you just have to kind of slow it down and not interrupt the person. And we oftentimes will do that. So I really feel just having that open communication and being open is very important.
And it sounds like sharing that knowledge about the disease, what's the best way to communicate with the person, can really provide a good experience, not only for you as the caregiver asking for help, but the people who are helping and offering to help, but also for the person living with dementia as well. So it's a benefit to everyone overall. I'm going to ask one last question. What's the one message you would want caregivers, care partners to leave with today when we're thinking about caring for the caregiver? Jim, I'm going to start with you.
No one, no person, no family, no caregiver need ever deal with dementia alone. For the sake of the person living with dementia, for the sake of the caregiver, for the sake of the family, take advantage of all of the resources. And here today, we've only just mentioned a few of the many resources and sources of help that are out there. Know that there's help out there. Please take advantage of it.
And Corey, I'm going to let you finish.
One of the things that I think that is so important is that, when you get onto a flight and the flight attendant says that in case of an emergency, you need to put the mask on yourself first before attending to another, that's what you need to do. You have to take care of yourself, and however you feed your soul and your body, that is what you need to do first, and to make sure that you're okay before you can take care of another. Because like my friend Jim said, you're not going to do your person any good if you aren't here to take care of them. And that can mean a variety of things. Having a mental breakdown isn't going to help your person either, not just necessarily the physical part of it. So I think that that's the thing that I want people to know, is that you need to take good care of yourself.
Well, all great suggestions and tips. And thank you, Corey and Jim, so much for sharing your story with us today. I know we covered a lot of information, and all caregivers have their own unique experiences with this disease. So there's a number of resources out there. Please feel free to visit, as Jim mentioned, All's Connected at allsconnected.org. And of course, the Alzheimer's Association 24/7 helpline can be reached at 1-800-272-3900. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Corey and Jim.